Hey Recon family, good to see you. This is Chaplain Owens. Are you preparing for your first deployment? Maybe you've been on deployment multiple times and you're just getting ready. Well, I wanted to talk to you today about 5 best practices of how to prepare for deployment. Stay tuned. Right. The first thing that I would encourage you to do when you're preparing for deployment is to set your expectations. Now, expectations can range all over the board. I usually try to narrow it down to 5 topics. Now, within that, it's going to be, what are my physical goals? What are my mental goals? What are my emotional goals? Social, and yes, spiritual as well. You probably figured that coming from a chaplain, of course. We'll get to that in a second. What type of things, though, can you start preparing yourself for physically? When you go on deployment, you may be gone 6 months, 9 months, maybe up to a year or so, and you've got a lot of time to work on you. Right now, you may be crushing the gym, you may be great at endurance running, you may be doing all kinds of great things fitness-wise. And maybe you're not even a fan, though, of doing the gym or other fitness things. I was very fortunate on my first tour to be able to room with our CFL, or Command Fitness Leader. And this Command Fitness Leader was a gym rat. I mean, he was in there all the time. He was great, and he and I got a chance to get pretty close. I felt like during that time, one of my best friends on that deployment for sure. And it was during that time that I felt challenged physically to go to the gym. There was accountability. There was, strength challenges. There was a lot of great opportunity to get in there. The most important thing is I began to feel better about myself. And as my physical strength improved, it made my nutrition want to improve. And also as a result, because I was so tired, my sleep improved a lot too. So that's one challenge you can kind of think about. What do I want to do physically? Second thing I'd encourage you to consider when we talk about setting expectations is, what type of mental goals do I want to achieve? So during this time, you might think of mental goals in terms of resiliency. How do I want to make myself more resilient? Well, the mental goals, there's going to be all sorts of opportunity in terms of building resiliency, and then also working on that educational goal that you may have that you've been putting off for far too long. So those are great opportunities. All right, the third thing, when you're establishing your expectations, you need to think about your emotional health, right? It's easy to identify physical goals. It's easy to identify mental health goals a lot of times, but emotional is a little bit more elusive. I'd challenge you to find yourself an accountability partner, someone that you can trust on this deployment. Give them permission to speak truth into your life, to acknowledge when there is something that is lacking. If they see you becoming very emotional, not steady state in the way that you respond to things, maybe you're beginning to react rather than respond, then give them permission to talk to you about those opportunities. The fourth thing I'd tell you to consider when we're talking about setting expectations is social. Now, especially during COVID, this is something that I think is critical. I've talked to more and more service members here in recent months that have come to me about stressors, about other issues. I mean, it can range from anything from relationships to legal and discipline matters. But underlying a lot of it, some of the biggest stressors that they're dealing with is just feeling out of place, feeling very alone, not having somebody they can trust to talk to. And especially, one of the most horrible things that you'll find on deployment sometimes is the loss of a loved one. And so COVID's definitely amped it up, made it difficult. So finding a team of people, it may be people in your shop, it may be people in the gym, it may be people that you eat chow on the mess decks with or out on deployment, wherever you're at. So that's critical. Find people who you can trust and establish a relationship with them. If you're a believer, you're a practicer of a faith, I would encourage you to pray with those people, to join community in that way, to get plugged in maybe in a chapel service of some sort. Okay? The fifth thing I'd encourage you, and this goes back to spiritual health and expectations. When you're setting your expectations, where do you want to end up at the end of your deployment spiritually? You may be coming in and thinking, man, it's been months, it's been years since I've darkened the door of a church. And you may find yourself in your faith group looking and saying, hey, I don't know a lot of these people, but I am available for God to use me however. And so this is a great opportunity to build community, to reestablish your faith, to be able to find out how you can actually be utilized within your faith and then exercise that faith muscle, as we say a lot of times. Guys, the second best practice of preparing for deployment is to expect the unexpected. I remember walking on the deck plates. It was out in the hangar bay of our ship during the first deployment. And I remember walking up to this old salty Master Chief. He was our top snipe. He was a guy that worked down in the engine room, but he was somebody that everybody looked up to. He was a little salty, but a good guy. And I remember walking up to him as a brand new chaplain and not having ever been on deployment and saying, "Hey, Master Chief, what can I expect about deployment?" And he looked at me, kind of grinned in a salty manner, and he just simply said to me, "Don't plan on coming home when they say you're coming home." And I was like, "Oh my, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that." One of the top things I remember my wife and I talking about when coming into the military was it's going to be challenging when we face deployments. We knew that. But that was okay. We prepared ourselves for it, and I was so thankful that this Master Chief told me to set my expectation, to be prepared, to not come back at the right time. That was probably estimated that things were going to constantly change. The second thing I'd encourage you to think about when we're talking about being ready for unknown, the things that are unknown to us, is to become a student of your craft. Now, I know I talked about in the first best practice about your mental health and about working on things educationally. But one thing we don't think about a lot of times is this is one of the best opportunities for service members to actually do their job. A lot of times when they're back in home guard, in garrison, they're going to be doing a whole host of different things and getting involved in collateral duties, things that they probably would never do in the real world in terms of deployment and actually utilizing their skills. So now they're getting a chance to. So if you're going to get a chance on deployment to utilize your skills, find out what they are. Be able to achieve your warfare device. Get that warfare pin that you wear. So like on mine, I got an FMF pin. Chaplains, that's the only one we can qualify for unless you have prior service, of course. And so take advantage of doing that no matter what your operational specialty is or your rate if you're in the Navy. You get my point there. And so I encourage you to make sure that you're taking advantage of all the opportunities for growth. Find yourself a mentor, be challenged, and then also hold people accountable. All right, number 3. This is probably the biggest one. Maybe I should have saved it for the last, but if you're hanging in there with me, we're going to try to run through these quickly. I won't have time to unpack them too much, though. Your chain of command should do a pretty good job setting you up for success for most of these already, but this is just good redundancy. First thing I encourage you is to think about a power of attorney. If you're married, if you've got a parent, someone that you can entrust with all of your personal assets. If you're a very junior person, you may not have a whole lot to worry about, but I still encourage you to have some type of power of attorney on that. Speak to an attorney, though, as far as what type of power of attorney to get. Try to get some advice on that. Some people don't like the idea of doing a full general power of attorney because, of course, it gives so much authority to that individual. So maybe you want to have very special powers of attorney. So again, talk to somebody that's a subject matter expert in that area. The second thing to consider there is a will. Go ahead and have a will drafted up for how you want things to play out in case something were to happen to you on deployment. Another thing to consider, if you have a family, a spouse, children, think about a family care plan. What happens in emergency situations? What happens if a hurricane comes through? What happens for child care things? What happens if COVID spikes again and your family has to isolate themselves, relocate? There's a whole host of different things that I encourage you to try to consider. So please talk to your significant others about a family care plan to make sure that everybody feels safe, has a place to go in a natural disaster of anything of that nature. All right. Something else to kind of consider too. I was asking my wife and consulting her, I said, hey, what type of things do you remember when I went on to my first deployment that you wish you had known or that really was of great benefit to you? She really pointed out the Ombudsman program. Now that's something we have on the Navy, but maybe in your branch of service you've got an FRG or Family Readiness Group, or maybe your branch of service has a FRO or Family Readiness Officer. But there's generally some type of point of contact that you will be able to connect with, or your spouse rather will be able to connect with, in order to stay in the loop of what's happening. When are they coming home perhaps? Are we doing some type of mid-deployment celebration? What can we do to stay plugged in? And it's great from camaraderie. It's great for support, because the nice thing is that a lot of times those other families are going through the same type of stressors that your family's going through as well. So that's a great opportunity to take advantage of. Have you talked to your family about budgeting, about planning? And you might not think about this because a lot of times if you're on deployment, you might get some extra special pay. Have you thought about how to budget your pay for deployments? Are you putting a little bit back and kind of saying, you know what, I'm only going to spend this amount when we have a port visit or when we go somewhere special? So that's something to consider. And for a lot of you that's done this more than once, you're probably thinking, hey, I'm going to bank some money so I can buy me a new truck when I get back, or buy something really special. Okay? Have that conversation with your significant other. Please, please, please. There's something called a policy of mutual agreement that you and your significant other should be able to have this conversation and make sure there's no arguments or disputes while you're on deployment. You're going to be deployed. You need to focus on your job. Your spouse is going to be holding down the fort, and for all intents and purposes, will very much get into their own routine and find out what works best for them. And so if that's the case, you don't want to start having arguments about silly things that should have been or could have been prevented before actually deploying. Oh my gosh, this is a fun one. I have to encourage you, when we're talking about family readiness, we're also talking about hugs and kisses, okay? Now, get all those hugs and kisses you can beforehand. Don't be like me. Oh my gosh. Beforehand, I think I was so worried about getting everything right and just, I wanted to impress everybody. Now again, this is a difference between a first timer and a veteran, somebody who's been there, done that, got the t-shirt, right? So after you've done this, it gets a little bit easier in some regards, in others not. But hug and love those kids. Try not to have any arguments with that significant other. It's going to be tense. There's going to be times of confusion. There's going to be times of anxiety when you feel like, oh man, I'm going to be leaving them for so many months, and you're worried. And you're trying so hard to be calm, cool, and collected that a lot of times you may end up just kind of biting the hand of the one that you love. So please be careful in that. Just love them. We had a program when I went on my first deployment called United Through Reading. The chaplain's office actually kind of monitored that program and was able to serve all of our service members on deck to be able to take advantage of that. It was great. We were able to read a book, give that information on at that time it was on a CD. I think now they're doing more streaming, uploading, but you can be able to send a picture or a video of mom or dad or whoever the service member is deployed out to that family, and they can get a chance to watch you and feel like they're actually seeing you. Now, granted, we are in the 21st century now. Things are a lot better. You may find yourself in a very good deployment situation where you've got Wi-Fi, or at least you've got access to Wi-Fi. So if you're one of those lucky individuals, that's fantastic. Take advantage of it. And I'd encourage you to let your significant other know. Say, hey, look, I can either do this every day or once a week, or if you're having a difficult time because you're starting to get a little bit discouraged, let that person know. Don't leave that person back home wondering if you're okay or not, just because you kind of get down in the dumps when you're deployed. Because I promise you, it will happen at some point. You're going to get funky, and you're not going to want to talk to anybody. And so I just encourage you. Again, it goes back to setting expectations. Communicate that to your significant other. You're hearing me talk a lot about that significant other, right? There is a way to maintain intimacy. Yes, you heard me say it, intimacy. Now, I didn't say sex. I didn't say passion. I said intimacy. We need to define that a little bit. That's that connectedness. That is that blend that a spouse comes together with the other spouse and says, you know what? I trust this person. I give them my heart. I'm vulnerable before that person. That person knows every little thing about me. That's when we start talking about intimacy, that's what we're talking about. How do you maintain that on deployment? Well, again, good comms, good communication. We're going to talk about comms in just a second and how to do that. But the steady, consistent comms, building the trust, talking to them, engaging in in-depth conversations. And my significant other said this the other day. Janae told me, she said, it was so special just to be able to do a devotional together, or to read a book together, or maybe if I'm watching an old episode of some sitcom or something I've downloaded, maybe she can watch that too at the same time. And it's just kind of corny and weird, but I remember being on a port visit one time and looking up at the moon and saying, I wonder if my sweetheart's going to see that same moon. Well, of course she's going to see the same moon, but it's just one of those endearing things that I'm starting to be kind of high schoolish again and ushy-gushy. So anyway, maintain intimacy, find opportunities to do that and stay connected. So that does bring me to comms. It is so important for you to be able to maintain good comms. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but what are your options? Do you have an option to be able to find the internet, to Skype, to FaceTime, to do all the WhatsApp? You know, there's so many different platforms out there that you can use now. So taking advantage of that opportunity. Maybe it's just simply picking up the old telephone again. Maybe you've got a calling card and you're going to do that. Maybe you're on a ship. You don't have the comms that somebody, let's say, staying on land would have. So, but being able to find a way to have good communication with that significant other, with the family, and anybody else that's an encouragement to you. The final thing I would say in regards to family preparation would be things like auto maintenance, house maintenance, anything that could probably go wrong that maybe you have been the primary person on, and you want to make sure that significant other. And again, in today's day and age, it doesn't matter if you're the husband, the wife, it doesn't matter your role in it. There's a lot of people that just are not prepared to maintain. I've got 4 children, 2 are adults. I don't know if I have done an excellent job really preparing my own adult children for going and getting their oil changed and expecting how to change out the air filter on the house. Those type of things. They're small things, and it's not like the world's going to turn upside down if you don't handle some, except for maybe the oil change. But have those conversations. All right, the 4th best practice I can encourage you on when you're going on deployment is this. Prepare your uniforms. Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how important it is to look smart. You're going to feel better. Your chain of command is going to be proud of you and impressed. You're going to look like a leader. So go in there prepared. What does that look like? Well, you're going to need your working uniform, okay? Now again, depending on what platform and where you're deploying to, there may be some small details in that. Do you need subdued rank devices or subdued patches or things of that nature? What do you need for deployment? Find out about your working uniform. You may even need, secondly, a dress uniform. I know when we went out on a ship, we had dignitaries, we had different people that would come onto our ship. We were on a flagship, and so there was a lot of showing the flag and saying, hey, we're America, we're here, and just making those contacts with significant others. And so it was a great opportunity to be able to dress up, look smart, and your chain of command is going to expect it. Heaven forbid, this is a little bit different, but this is another reason to have your dress uniform with you. There were a few people along the way that probably do not make smart decisions on deployment, and as a result, they had to go and stand before their commanding officer for NJP or captain's mast. So if that happens, you need to have your dress uniform. So I'm not encouraging that. I hope that does not happen to you, but that's another reason. So you need to have your dress uniform. So working uniform, dress uniform. Make sure you've got some civilian attire. When you do get a chance to go out in town, or if you're on a ship, when you take those port visits, make sure that you've got something you can wear in town. You're not going to be able to wear your uniform in town. That's a huge no-no. But make sure that you also understand the customs and courtesies. Now, I think they've relaxed some of these out in 5th Fleet, but I remember when we were out there, out of respect for Ramadan and our host country, we wore long sleeves. Now, that has changed. I went out there in the last few years, and they've relaxed some of that. I was wearing short sleeves, but just kind of be mindful of certain things that you can and cannot do. Also, again, may seem like a small thing, but this goes very much back to the physical health part. All right, make sure you've got a workout uniform. You're going to be probably washing your own clothes and doing all that, so get used to that part. But you need to make sure you've got some PT gear. You may have opportunities to do a still beach picnic if you're on a ship, or to do some other type of gathering where you're going to get out with other people, and it's going to be fun, and it's going to be relaxed, and you're going to be playing games, hopefully, if you go through an extended period of time between port visits. All that being said, though, if you end up going into the gym, you say, you know what, I'm going to get the most physically fit I've ever been. Well, you've got to have clothes to be able to go in there. So shorts, T-shirts, good running shoes, things that you need to be able to stay fit. All right, and number 5, you've been waiting for this. Don't let this one catch you off guard. But we know, or we hope, we expect that you're going to come home from deployment, okay? So with homecomings, there are certain expectations that you should have or be preparing for, okay? So when we talk about homecoming, what does that look like for you? You're not going to exactly know when. You'll hopefully know where, unless you're having a change of port. But think about who you want to be there, if they're able to be there, if it's a traditional homecoming. Now, in a COVID environment, obviously that's a lot different right now, but again, we're expecting that to be more temporary than permanent. So, but when you come home, what's that first night or two with your significant other going to be like? All right, now before you get too excited about thinking about that, you got to think about who's taking care of the children. Are you going to have in-laws? Are you going to have parents there? Where are they staying? And again, not to stress you out, your significant other is going to probably take care of this, but as they're working those things out, you may want to have some type of situational awareness of that conversation. All right, so when you come back, you're going to have a whole bunch of different returning reunion briefs. It's where an outside agency is going to come in and they're going to encourage you about what that homecoming should be like, but also help you manage your expectations. Some things around the house may have moved. That significant other has been running the house for the last several months, has already established a battle rhythm. You were not a part of it, so you have to kind of ease back into that role. You have to ease back into that role. And I remember having that conversation with Janae and saying, hey, they're telling me that you're not going to want me to do a whole lot. She said on the telephone, she said, oh no, big boy, you're coming back. I'm putting you to work. And she was tired of doing a lot of things alone. But I did have to come in and recognize that some things were a little bit different. And that was okay. That was okay. Now, I'm going to give you a bonus. I gave you the top 5 here, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a bonus. On my first deployment when I came back, it was a little bit different. We came back Halloween of 2014, and it was exciting. I got a chance to see my family, my friends. I hugged everybody, loved them. It was all that being said, I remember going out trick-or-treating that night, and we went to a little trunk or treat at our church. I mean, we got involved, and everybody was so kind. Oh, Chaplain Owens, we're so glad you're back. Your family has just been absolutely wonderful. It was a little bit uncomfortable for me. For the last 9 months, my family, my seagoing family, had been on the ship. To see all these friendly faces that were not my blood kin was a little bit uncomfortable. To be able to have intimate conversations or hang out with them or do things, that's just not where my head was. It took me a good couple weeks to kind of get spun back up and get acclimated. So if you feel a little bit uncomfortable or weird, it's okay. That's normal. And if you got any questions about it, talk to your chaplain in your unit about it. And of course, that's always going to be in confidential communication. Glad you got a chance to check out these 5 best practices of your first deployment. So until next time, fair winds and following seas.